We want to welcome you to the Culture Architects new revamped podcast.
Oh, I like that.
And I am with my beautiful wife, Alexis.
Hello, guys.
And we're going to start doing multiple guests. We're going to have you on once a month.
Whoop, whoop.
We are married, running a ministry together, raising two kids.
Yes.
Been in ministry together.
Since we were married.
And I think you and I can probably shine a lot of light on ministry together, business together.
All the things, baby.
Cultural together.
Interracial.
Age gap, second marriage.
All the things.
And raising two boys.
Right.
And all that we've never really, talked about because we do so many different things. So I think let's jump in. Marriage. I want to talk on marriage. We're going to have fun.
Yes, let's do it.
Because this won't be fast paced like the encouragement show. It'll be more dialogue you love.
We just dive right in.
Yep. That's how it goes. Let's do it.
Okay.
So in marriage, I find it interesting because being that I was in business before there was you, understanding business.
Before there was me.
Sadly.
Oh, man.
The marriage before you. And then the age gap, we were married or dating, married 22, you 22, not me 22, me 30.
That's crazy. You were married
at 34
too, right? The first time?
Yes.
Anyway.
But that's another story and we'll get into all that, like how we got to meet. But there's a lot of things I saw the way I wanted life to be. I already knew it. You came in, it was like, I feel like it was putting a rock in a turbine that's cleaning. You're like bouncing you around.
Right.
Did it ever feel like you were like trying to find your footing?
With you or just in life in general?
Mainly with me. Like we know life in general. We've got a glimpse of the, encouragement show, Speak Life that you're doing on Wednesdays. Good plug. But, with marriage, there's two people.
Right.
And those two people both think that they're 100% right 100% of the time. And, what's great about our personalities is we both think we're right. And we're willing to talk about it, fight about it, talk about it.
We're both passionate.
Yes.
Like, one thing about us is that we're not really passive when it comes to stuff. When something happens, we're both like vocal about it. Yes. We don't hold back. So I'm like, I'm going to let you know now, which, may not be the best all the time, but I'm going to let you know now how I feel. So you don't ever have to wonder how I feel. This is what it is. Same with you.
I'm not going to tell you how I feel, and I'm just going to go do it. And so that makes for a recipe for disaster because
we're both loud.
You're more verbal. I'm more worker, and it can create conflict because I'm doing things that you're like, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. I'm like, there's no time to talk about it. We got things to do. We got this happening, that happening. And so, it's been something I've been wanting to talk about. So I've got some scriptures, but I think the best way to start out, because, there's so many people that are watching. Hopefully everybody's going to get married. They may not be married watching us, but they're working on getting married.
Right.
We have both
ways.
Well, I'm saying we have both ways to, discuss it from the female side, male side. We have interracial. So there's a lot of perspective, but
opposing
the thing. So in 1 Peter 3:7, it says, husbands, you are to treat your wives with tenderness, viewing them as a feminine partner who deserves to be honored, for they will be co-heirs with you with divine grace of life, so that nothing will be hindered from your prayers. And I don't know if that many people understand that your prayers can actually be blocked if you're a bad husband. Why are you smiling so much?
Because our conversation we had in the car with the cactus.
Oh, you can't do like a, like they don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so, you treat me with tenderness for the most part.
I'm working on it.
But I was saying in the car, I'm like, okay, so there's like another scripture, or maybe this is it, where it says, treat your wife like the delicate flower that she is.
Right.
And I started rolling because I'm like, sometimes you treat me like a cactus. Like I'm a cactus.
Chad's over there.
I'm like, not a delicate flower, like I'm a cactus.
Maybe because of the other 9,000 conversations, I get a little frustrated. I'm like, whatever.
When I see tenderness, I just wanted to roll, like start laughing.
But that's a real thing with men, is that they're either too tender or not tender. There's no balance. It's either, it's like I heard somebody say like, man, I didn't realize that individual was so emotional. And then you have people who are like just stone as concrete. I mean, they're just concrete. Like yeah. And, life has a way of beating people up, sucking the emotions out of them. And you have to remember, you got to take time to especially honor your wife. Because God built you guys emotional. God did decide to make you empathetic more than the male, more, what do you call it? Nurturing to children.
Right.
And so that's how you like to be respected, way before love, respected. Is love that like, that they're actually caring, they do. And certain times it can become more business.
Wait, no. The man wants respect. We want love. And there's a cycle because it's like, if we don't respect, then you guys don't love. And then if you don't love, then we don't respect. So it's like this cycle.
We're doing it right now. You got it figured out and you're just going to interrupt me. Yes.
That's why it says Christ wants us to love, you guys to love your wife like Christ loves the church.
Right.
And then for us to respect. Anyways.
Are you telling me what you'd like me to do?
No, you do that. You serve me.
But it's right. But the problem is if your personality, so that's one thing, we're kind of turning this into like the love hour, but it's, if you, if depending on your type of way you like to be loved, I'm like acts of service. So I'm like, well, I'll help you out here. I'll go get the groceries. I'll drop a load in the laundry for you. I'll make a mess for you.
Big mess.
I will do things for you. And you're like, I don't want you to do that.
Well, it changed.
Okay.
My thing used to be physical touch and quality time, but ever since I became a mom, it's acts of service and quality time.
Okay.
So I do like that now.
Yes,
but my top is quality time. So I want you to spend all the time with me.
Yes. Not talking, listening, not fixing, listening.
Right.
And that's a situation that I think that in this day and age, we need to show healthy marriages. We have to show the good, the bad,
the ugly.
So that's like the good and the bad, but the good, the glory,
good.
that gives people the opportunity to want to be married, want to have children, because we should be able to do business together. There's nothing funnier. It's like, oh, I can't work with them, and I get it. Like you and I sometimes. I'll have an idea and I'm like, you don't get it. And you're like, you're not listening. I'm like, no,
we have
you don't.
Different perspectives.
I want to
almost like saying the same thing, but different perspectives.
Yeah, like, but we always have the perspective of what your approach is. So you will spend 20 hours picking colors, getting ready to roll. And I'm like, how do we market it? Hours. Yeah. And I'm looking at time over the value. Doesn't make what you're doing is wrong, but it can definitely frustrate. I know I've frustrated you.
Yes.
You said that too quick. But I know I've been frustrated by you, but I have to find, if I don't look for the good in you, it's super easy in a marriage to find the bad.
Right. And if you focus on that, that's when you're like, you know what? Are we even compatible?
Right. And it's I wish there was more people in ministry doing ministry as a couple, not there's the male.
But I love
the female.
And if on paper, we are not compatible.
No.
Like if you were to look at papers,
no.
Like I remember when we first got together, people were like, there's no way. Because we were just like, we're so different. Like different and the same at the same time. Right?
Yes.
And so it's like,
I'm just letting you explain paper, this.
If you look at it, we don't work.
Right.
But God, And when we do team up together and we have something that we need to accomplish, we're good. Remember we did like a team. So there was this one time we did a team exercise.
Right.
Where we had to work together and there was like this whole obstacle course. And one had to be blindfolded and the other one had to lead the other with their voice. And they had to walk around this obstacle course to get to the end by the sound of their spouse's voice. And I don't remember who did what. Was I the one leading?
We switched. We did both.
Switched.
We did both.
We ended up winning and I was shocked. I was like, wow, babe, we actually do work together. When we are on the same side and on the same team, we work well together.
Right. You definitely know how to verbalize what your concerns are, what you want. And you do know how to listen.
Right.
But there's a healthy balance of knowing when to not let someone's emotions overtake the narrative. but also make sure, because like you guys do feel, so you might feel too much and you go, okay, we can't get stuck here.
Right.
But I can't also negate it and be like, just be quiet. This is what has to happen.
Like just shut up and put up.
Well, that's how you'll box somebody out.
Right. Or shut down their emotions.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, if you want to have a successful relationship and you want your kids to see a marriage that they want to be a part of, it has to start with the family and the husband and the wife. And there's so many dynamics nowadays with pressure of finances,
right?
Life.
That's like the top thing on why people don't work: finances and I think sex or something like that.
You're talking about working relationship or marriage working?
Marriage working.
Right. Yes.
Divorce.
Yes. I didn't know where you were going with that.
Sorry. I'll clarify.
It needs to be discussed in the sense that like we have to slow down. We have to enjoy each other's company. It can't be so business contracty.
I enjoy your company. I could be with you 24/7.
I don't. Okay.
You probably not me to be on you 24.
Well, here's the irony: is like I like being around you when you're not on your phone. Like I'm not used to this. Like because I'm driving everywhere and like everybody in the vehicle's on a tablet.
I've been doing better.
Sure. I'm not going to disagree.
I've been doing better.
Yes, you have.
Right? No, I'm just kidding.
But there's even that relationships where the women will tell the men, you don't, you will, because they're so afraid of the fear.
Like Lil Jessie?
Well, that, or you just see women like, you're going to do this.
Like controlling.
And we've lost because of the dynamic of households where people weren't raised into like with two parents. It was a single parent. And so there's always an abstinence and there's always a dominant perspective. So men might be more emotional, not know when to, or they can be raised by a hard father who then either can be
so then they end up being passive.
Or they can be too passive. And so we're always dealing with this ups and downs and having to work through things. And I think Prophet Kevin, who's in our lives, said it best, is like, when you marry your spouse, you marry the family.
Right.
You marry their good and their ugly. And you have to be okay with it.
Right.
And I think a lot of times in the early days, we're just like, oh.
You're just so in love.
My goodness.
Like, you're like, I don't see. Love literally is blind, especially in the beginning. Because on the outside looking in, like it's always, I never understood until, we've been married almost 8 years now. And I see newly couples or newly people that are together. And you're like, guys, don't you see that? Like, don't you want to work on that? They're like, no, I'm just so in love, and you're like, okay. And I know that we were like that at one point where we were like, love was blind and like.
But you have to be patient. Like it's been a journey with us because when you are involved in a lot of things, the one thing that suffers the most is the relationship.
Right.
When I look back over the last 7-8 years, what suffered the most is our relationship of like, are you okay? Like, hey, you just have to deal with this. Mm-hmm. And when you're in, I don't want to say toxic environments, but like if ministry is difficult, I remember when work can be difficult and there's no finite, like this is the why and we'll just fix it. Like we don't know what tomorrow brings. We're going to have to figure it out. When we were in Texas, not knowing what the next step of life is and you're feeling depressed, I can't be like, you need to stop being depressed.
like get up,
I can't yell it out of you.
Right.
And I can't be like, just do what you need. You're like, I can't if I.
But a shout out to you. You've been so patient with me because I got married really young, had a lot of like traumatic baggage, and you were just so patient with me.
Thank you.
Like in areas of, I wasn't always so communicative.
Right.
In the past, I was shut down to where I would just be like, I don't want to talk about it, or I just cry and just like, you're like, what's wrong? Tell me. And I'm like, I can't tell you because I don't know how to do it. But the more patient you were with me and the more I walked through healing, now I'm like, I'll communicate everything.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite. But you were so patient even in those times, because I've had many times I was depressed. And you always took on the load of what I was supposed to be doing. You helped take on that role and the load of it when I couldn't. And so that means so much to me because I'm like, you you just stepped in, and with the teamwork with marriage, it's supposed to be teamwork.
Right.
And so where I couldn't give, you took, and where I couldn't, you know what I'm trying to say.
And in saying that, and I appreciate the compliments,
because it just meant so much to me. And
you can't foresee life scenarios.
Right.
Like you didn't say like, oh, in 2.5 years, I'm going to get really depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go through some trauma. I'm going to go through some recognition.
And shut down.
And I'm going to shut down on you. And I hope you're good for it.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens. And you're like, you're not acting your same.
Right.
And then you talk.
But you could have chose to just leave me, or
leave
me like that, but like just leave.
Just check out yourself. And yeah. But the thing that I would encourage somebody that maybe is going through that is that you've got to keep going.
Right.
When you stop, everything stops.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only thing I was like, well, we're going to have to get through this.
Right.
Hopefully tomorrow gets better. It didn't. Hopefully tomorrow gets better. It didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to keep searching. It's like the individual who buys a territory and is like, well, I'm going to start gold mining. You just start out with sand.
Right.
And you sift. And you throw that bucket away and you sift. And you just keep waiting for those gems. Then life gets better. And you don't know why this relationship that you met some friends. And next thing you know, it's like, wow, I'm connected to this church. I didn't know how and why. Or you get involved in things. And that's what I would encourage you is that if you're struggling, you feel like you're not connected, you have to say, well, I'm going to sift until I find the next gem. I got to keep going. I got to keep my head up. The Bible says that joy comes in the morning. There are down days. And the sad part is those days can last.
Right.
But you got to keep looking. You know, the Bible says that he who seeks will find. You got to seek. And I think a lot of people are just so beaten down.
Right.
And going back to social media is everybody is plastic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what ethnic group, what age. There's this version of life that everything is perfect for them. Like everyone sees us they're so chipper. What they don't see is the 12 minutes.
Knives behind the door.
Thanks for wrecking my analogy.
I'm sorry.
But like in the morning, I'd like you to get up sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, can you not be ready? But then I have to deal with the kids. We're trying to set them. Do we tippy toe out where they don't know we left and grandma's watching them?
Take 5 minutes to. I was kidding.
Or do you get them? And it's like, things never really work out the way we want them, but we have to be patient. Be like, okay.
That's another thing. You've been patient with my time, but I've been doing a lot better. But in the beginning days, you're like, come on, we got to go. And I'm like, wait.
But you have to recognize that we are unique people. We grew up in two different households.
For real.
And all of a sudden in one night you come together and now you're trying to build a household and everybody thinks their life was normal.
Right.
As I remember a lot of times, like, I don't know if you think this was normal, but it ain't. And I'm like, it is so normal. It's so normal that we're quiet on Thanksgiving and we don't talk.
No, like, I'm so used to loud. And
it's having the patience to say, okay, what do you like? Mm-hmm. This is what I like. And then both parties have to find common ground.
Right.
And I think what we measure common ground is right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only way you have a successful relationship, you know, we say marriage, but relationship in so many things when you're involved is that your flag has to be able to move 100% into your territory.
Right.
And your flag has to move. And it's not this like, we always say, we hear these cliches, I'll meet you in the middle.
Mm-hmm. But you really?
Well, no, what happens is you feel robbed at the 50% mark. Like, I'm only getting the 50% of what I wanted.
Give it your all.
You give it your all, hoping that she or he will give it your all. And so it's a back and forth. Right.
Like a dance.
Yeah. But we have to, that's why the Bible constantly talks about, as Christ, as we are the church, us as the husbands, we have to lay our lives down. But I don't know if everyone's ready to lay their lives down in a relationship.
Most people end up getting divorced because they say that person didn't make me happy.
Right.
And it's like, what? That's not what marriage is about. The minute I hear somebody say, he makes me happy, I'm like, that happiness eventually will go away.
Doesn't make me happy is my soda. 28 minutes after I've had it goes flat.
Right.
And it does, like, we can't judge everything
by our happiness because our emotions are wavering.
But things change. Like,
right.
I used to be hungry right before I ate. Now I'm full. Now my needs have changed.
So then your wife becomes a mom and she changes. Everything changes. Her body, her like her edginess, her funness, like everything changes.
Right.
And then you're like, well, she's not the same person. I don't know what happened. She is a different version.
Right.
And so when that happens, people are like, oh, they don't make me happy anymore. I'm done. Just discard you like a piece of trash.
Right.
And it's like, no, that's not what marriage is. So when I hear someone say that and they're wanting to get married and stuff, I'm like, you have the wrong mindset.
Right.
If you're not ready, like I tell all the single girls that are like, oh, I can't wait to get married. And I'm like, my one piece of advice is if you're not ready to lay your life down 100% for your spouse and give, then you're not ready to get married. Because that's what it is.
I thought we were going to talk about like work and relationship. I love how we went, but it's good because it's all good because it's the relationship that works. Because then when you go to work, you feel joyful. You're not like, oh, we've been fighting all night,
right?
Like you don't realize like the relationship needs to be healthy. You know, it is funny. The longer you've been married, you tell every young person, they don't just pick blindly, just because they're, cute. You need to make sure they're stable. They emotionally can have a conversation.
Right.
They have a work ethic. They're willing to clean a house. But then as people who are already married and they're saying, yeah, but you don't understand my spouse, there has to be a grace to say, I've got to find the joy. There's a reason why I committed to them. You got to go back to that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people who feel like their spouse isn't as committed as they are.
Right.
To them, to the church. And so you get a lot of different personalities and you have to work through that.
Right. And I'm sure there's seasons where you do feel that. I feel like everyone's going to do that because we're not going to always be 100% always chipper and stuff, right?
Right.
Like there's always going to be times where.
But I'm not talking about chipper. I'm saying so I'll always ask you on Saturday, are you singing? It has nothing to do with me. If you sing every week.
You have to give the backstory though. What do you mean?
So you sing on our services, but when you do that, it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
Doesn't make me feel better. It just makes more work for me. I have to support what you're involved in. And a lot of times we want everything to be like, well, I do this. You need to do it with me. I can't. You don't want me singing with you.
You howl.
I howl. But even in the sense that like our morning routine, I have to like not walk in the bathroom because I have my music playing. You're like, I've got my music. I've got to learn my notes.
But I got to practice.
I have to say, okay, I'll turn mine off. Like, because yours is definitely more important than mine.
So it's like in the little things too.
And that's what I'm trying to say is that you having this hobby, and I hate to use a hobby, but this desire you want to do, it changes my schedule.
Right.
I have to
go earlier.
I have to go earlier. You've got to get what you need to do prepared, which then changes the dynamics. And if we look at like, well, what do I get out of it?
Right. Like, what can I get?
And so it's like, hey, we're married for a reason. If they like a sport, like I remember when we were, and this goes back to, I know if we're talking about, picking your spouse, but even I think you've done a great job laying down your life in things that I like doing that you could care less and probably hate.
Aww.
And so it's like you choose to go on little 4-wheel excursions. You hate the mud. You hate being stuck where you can't use your phone. It's dirty. We're typically sweating, getting wet. It's not your thing.
Right.
Right.
I'd rather be on concrete, going to coffee shops and shopping.
But you've made a choice to like, you know what, this is what he likes.
Right.
I want to make sure I'm with him. And it does definitely makes the time more enjoyable.
Aw,
and I think that if we were individuals and we laid down our lives and we found out, what do you like? I want to figure out a way to make it
and
better.
To spend that quality time with you. Even if I don't like it, I'm with you.
Right.
And so I guess that's how it is with working with each other. Like, I'm like, I get to see what you're doing and we get to do it together, and we may not agree all the time, but I get to be
But even
with
if we
you.
don't agree, because there's a lot of things I want to do it my way.
Right.
You want to do it your way. I have a vision. I have a vision for your ministry. I have it's easy when you're creative. You have to know boundaries. And I think in marriages, you're like, back off. Like because I see this also in my parents' life. My mom is like, I'm tired of being known as Alfred's wife or the mom to Lance.
Right.
And there's moments where I'm sure as a woman or even a male, it doesn't matter where you're at, you're tired of living in somebody's shadows.
Right.
And I'm sure it can feel intimidating, or it's like, I don't guess you haven't had to live that yet.
No.
But like there's definitely people out there. I've heard it in other family members who are like, I'm tired of living behind my spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And if
we both have big personalities.
Yes.
So I think it's a little different with us, right?
Probably.
Because I never had that to where it's like, oh, you're just Lance's wife or blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So
you're Alexis when you walk in the room.
Not like in that way. I'm just saying we both have big personalities. Right.
But we have to take into account.
And I think that could be like a,
Well, you look at quiet people. Mm-hmm. I'm like, do you guys ever talk? Like, have you addressed one thing in your life? Like, it's like they probably text what they're wanting to eat. Like they don't. But then with us, we've rediscussed it 12 times.
But we're like,
yeah. And people are like, is this how you guys really? And I'm like, I guess it's like, this is what works for us. And I think that's the number one thing relationships have to realize.
Find what works for your family.
Make it work for you, and don't try to define yourself how others are doing it.
Right.
If it's godly and it's biblical, then do it. Don't try to make yourself a carbon copy of somebody else's relationship.
Right.
Because there's two unique people just trying to make that thing work over there. Right. Don't try to say, well, so-and-so, I wanted to use a name, but I'm afraid that, somebody's name, because, you have a cliche name. It's
Jane and John.
Jane and John, Billy and Becky. Yeah. It's like, you can't say like, well, Billy and Becky, they do this. It's like, no, we don't like you. That's the worst thing is comparison.
Right.
And in marriages,
you should never
compare. You can compare for a lot of different reasons. Like, well, they don't seem to backtalk. Well, they also don't seem to ever want to go to somewhere. It's like you have to figure out what works and then make it work. And if you guys are both happy. So hopefully this is helping you guys. Yes. Like and share. Lex and I are going to do more topics on relationships, working together, the ups and downs, very transparent, because there are moments where we could completely ignore each other.
Right.
And be completely fine being like, well, I'm just going to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think what my greatest takeaway would be is figure out what your spouse need is and try to meet it, in the sense that, like, if they're intimidated by something, don't hang them out and be like, well, that's just their issue.
Right. But I guess I would say, to add to that, is we have to find each other's strengths and weaknesses. Because where I'm weak, you're strong. And areas that you're weak, I'm strong in that.
Right.
And so we're supposed to complement each other in that. And I think in the workplace or ministry, whatever you're doing together, you're there to help cover each other's weaknesses and flaws.
Well, but even, that's a little bit of a cliche thing, because I don't believe everybody's, like, your strength is not my weakness. A lot of times we have strength and strength.
Right.
And weakness, and then we have to decide who's going to pick up what or who's going to back off. So, like, both of our strengths, like, even, like, we will design something like, well, I think it should be like this. I'm like, no, it can be like this. You're like, no, it matters. I'm like, I don't know if it really matters. It's like, I have to recognize your strength and be ready to just back off and say, let you have that. Like, right. I don't have to always have the final say.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we're doing these shows, nobody knows where they're going, but it's like, you have to respect what somebody says and not try to
be like, it was cliche.
Be like, oh no, that's not what you should say. Or and it's like,
I'm messing with you.
But that's the truth. And it's so hard because relationships are redefining by the moment.
Right.
It just only takes a phone call to hear a tragedy. And if it's not my family member, you're not as wrecked.
Right.
But I need to be sympathetic to your needs, to your family's needs. Vice versa. If something's going on, you being the mom, it's like, oh, he's going to have to leave again. Like, It's not exciting, but it's that's sometimes what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think us being willing to lay our lives down and be like, I know not everything can be perfectly the way I'd like it to be.
Right. And you can't, I think a lot of times we think that we can plan out our lives.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of like plan out goals, but you really, like, what do you do when something comes your way that wasn't in the plan?
Right.
As a couple, you can't just be like, that's it. Like,
right.
You have to roll with the punches.
Right. So hopefully this is how you guys are enjoying this. We're going to have Alexis on every 4th, 5th, as we're adding new guests, and we're going to start like moving into more conversations with different guests, different topics, getting different perspectives, enjoying all the new listeners that we have with all the new shows, because we've got shows starting everywhere. Ooh, and Vinny will still be on. We're enjoying his perspective as a pastor, father. There's so much going on in our lives as now that we're growing as CA. We're going to get different ideas, different concepts. So basically share with you that one, if you've gone through these emotions, if you've gone through these different perspectives, you're not broken. The worst thing to go through life and feel like no one understands me. No one understands what I'm going through. And what our goal is to shine light and say, hey, this is what we've been through. This is what we're doing. Hopefully this helps you. You're not unique to this scenario. And you realize, okay, they got through this. They figured this out. I can do it too. We started something and it didn't work out. And then we restarted it and it didn't work out. But we're okay. We're plowing. And I say that in the sense is that not everything starts and not everything in the middle is the way we perceive it. But as we go through it, it refines and we're always looking for the better. So I just was hoping that you guys would enjoy this, that you understand a little bit more about our working dynamic.
Right.
And how unique it is. I started this side. I guess I started this side first, like kind of the quasi broadcasting, and had to be really patient with you. This will be,
mean?
You know what it means.
You have to be patient with me.
It was hard for you in the beginning.
It was like pulling teeth.
And I really wanted you to do this. And there was days where you were like, I'm not going in.
Yeah, I'm just like, I just don't want to do it.
And then rather than combat you and be like, no, you're going to, I guess, if you don't want to.
One thing with me, you cannot force me.
Nope. And I've had to learn that is that some people can be forced into it and then they're like, okay. Others have to be like, I'm going to leave it alone. When you choose to, you will. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that, but I've had to learn your personality. And I think a lot of marriages and relationships don't take time to learn the who they are.
Right.
And I figured you out. Like you may talk a lot, but you don't really you'll be like, I don't feel like it, but you've never dropped the ball on anything.
No, I won't give up or anything.
But it sounds like you might.
Right, but I won't.
So I learned that, but in the beginning days, I was like,
grit.
I spent too much time talking you through something, and you're like, I just don't want to hear it. I might need some space to get my head in the game.
I was always like that with my mom too. Like you can ask her, I was always like, she would like say something and she would lecture me at times. And she would always say, I know that you're listening. You don't look like you're listening, but you are. And that's how it is. I may not look like I am, but I am.
And so hopefully this is helping you as marriage and relationships to realize, take time to get to know your spouse.
Right.
Take time to get to understand you.
And I'm understanding you too.
Okay. So you got any final words?
A bulldozer. No.
That I am. And
we didn't even talk about the interracial side.
That's
like a whole nother thing.
We got plenty of time. We got a lot of, if there's something you still want to touch, let's go.
No, it's all right. I was just saying like that comes into play too. Because when you get to know, like to me, I'm like, I just always grew up around cultural things, which you have too because you're Hispanic. But what I'm trying to say is like with some things like me not.
You might have to clarify because some people lost that. Like, even though I have a last name named Garduna.
Okay, so Lance is half white, half Mexican. His dad is Mexican.
Right.
And so he doesn't look like it, but he is. And then I'm Puerto Rican, black, and that's just the main parts of some other things in like Irish. And just like culturally, he's loud. He's the loudest one in his family, but my whole entire family's loud. And I remember when he first came over, when we were dating for Easter, we were just talking. And he's like, why are you guys screaming? Why is your mom screaming? I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't even know she was screaming. And he's like, she's so loud. And I'm like, that's just her regular talk. If you want to hear her scream, she can scream. And I'm like, so just things like that. And like the way that my perspective is towards even like parenting, like the way that like terms and things like that. And because he says spank. And I remember we had this little small, what is this? Not an argument, but like a small disagreement. He's like, when we have kids, we're going to say spank. I'm like, I'm not going to say spank. I'm going to say whoop. Like I whoop my kid. And that's just the terminology we use in my culture. Right. And he's like, no, spank. And so I used to laugh because I'm like, oh, come here, Johnny. I want to spank you. But I'm like, no, whoop has some more oomph. Like you're more serious. So I just think little things like that are funny. But also I know that there's so many interracial couples nowadays.
Yes.
And with different cultures, some are maybe more forceful or more what's the word?
Pushy? You can break that down geographically, just in America alone. You take a New Yorker, Bostonian, they're blunt. We got a few working in the office.
Yes.
They have no problem telling you. Blunt.
And also, like, I came from that mindset because that's where I grew up in the region where you're an independent boss woman. So I had a hard time at submitting at first because I'm like, yo, like, I could do me. I'm going to do what I want, you know? And I'm like, that wasn't right, though, because that's not what the Bible says.
Right.
But it was hard because that was what I grew up in. And then my whole mindset is like, oh, I got to be the one that's not just like with you, but I could provide too. Or I can be like a boss woman in
almost if you were the back seat, you were lesser than.
Right.
And so there was a mentality of like, I have to be in charge. I need to be in control. Yeah. Then I'm giving up my right, or it was the way you were raised in that culture.
Right.
It wasn't even your parent. It was the whole region.
The region. It was like environmental. The schools, like we grew up in the schools there. So it's like the guys, even the guys around, they wanted one that worked more than them. Like they're like, that's a woman. Now that's a woman. So you're like, okay, so I'm going to have my own house, my own car, and I'm going to be that woman. And so that was my mindset. And then you are the opposite. You're like, I want you to stay home. And we when we were friends, we used to talk about this. He's like, when I have a wife, I want her to stay home. I want her to, be able to just take care of the house. And I laughed. I literally was like dying laughing because I'm like, that is not me. And I'm like, I don't know who your wife's going to be, but that would never be me. Like, I can't do that. I have to work.
I ain't staying home to raise no kids.
Right. And then here I am today at home.
But then you have things like that. So you have like very brass personalities up in the north.
Right.
Go
the south. Oh my goodness.
You have this Southern belle. Nobody talks about any of their problems.
Right.
You're like, your mom left your dad, slept with the AC unit guy.
But everything is good.
But everything is good.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. And it's like, and you're like, oh. And so understanding, like getting to the root of things and be able to talk through them and realize then you have you would call like, yeah, bro.
Yeah, bro. Not bro. So you guys say bro. White people say bro. Most white. And we say bruh.
Right.
Oh, bruh.
Well, so you get like this, like Californian, West Coast, everything's like laid back, no big deal.
And we're just like fast paced, like.
Well, there's a fast pace, but I'm saying there's a lot of dynamics that we don't recognize even outside of culture, is just regional. And
so not only are we interracial, but we're literally from the opposite side of the country.
Oh my goodness.
He's from the West Coast.
I can't stand the East Coast because no vehicle fits on the roads. They're all
used to walk it everywhere.
They're all meant for horse and buggy or a little like Mini Cooper.
Right. And I've been on buses and stuff, and he's never been on a bus.
I've never ridden on a bus. Funny. And it's not even an insult to take a bus. That's what you did for public, because people didn't have garages. They didn't have cars. They didn't need them.
I'm scrappy, ready to fight, and you're more like...
I don't know what that's.
I'm just kidding.
But there's so much that goes in plays, and it's that there's a lot of marriages, a lot of relationships. They're coexisting. They haven't taken the time to recognize, they have concerns. They have fears.
Right.
And one thing that's been awesome in our church group is our leaders have taught me that when there's something going on, there's always a root behind it.
Right.
So when you see a lot of fear, there's a lack of faith. When there's like this like trepidate, like there's shame, they're not willing to walk into things.
Right.
And marriages have that. And you'll see one person be like, oh, I know that they're called into ministry, but I could never do it. I didn't go to seminary school. I didn't do this. I'm like, why? Well, you just read your Bible.
Right.
And so there's even relationships, people who are willing to take the back seat. And then what happens is you get catapulted and you forget to take your spouse along for the journey. And you just keep getting separated.
Right. It's almost like your roommates. Now, that's one thing, again, that I appreciate about you is you're always pushing me out of my comfort zone. You're trying to push me. And I'm like, because at times I'm just like, oh, I'm fine staying here. And you're like, no, like you're meant to be more. Right. And I remember you used to prophesy over me when I was 23 or before I was 23. You're like, when you turn 23.
You got so mad.
I used to get mad because of the wording. But he's like, when you're 23, you're going to like, something's gonna take place to where you start to walk in your own. And I said, like, what you mean? Like, that was my attitude, my I'm like, what do you mean that you don't think I'm in my own right now? Like, I was offended, but now as I'm older, I understand that you were really just prophesying over me because I had a lot of stuff I had to walk through.
Well, and that's the job of a spouse. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily
build up each other
and see into the future what you're going to be and then speak it over them. And so really encourage you guys, take time to enjoy your spouse. You decided to give your life to them. Pick one, hopefully. And, not let it just become like I come home, you cook, or whatever the relationship is. Well, no, I even know people who are like, I can't cook. It's like, I think you're trying not to cook. Like, I think you don't want the work. So you decided to, dump the whole bucket of salt on. It's like, whatever the case is, enjoy each other, recognize that life has pressures. Now we have mixed marriages, mixed relationships. You've got step kids. It gets complicated.
We don't. But
no, I'm saying like, there's so many moving factors, and then you've got moving attitudes, and there's a lot going on in relation. And then you throw business, you throw jobs, you throw ministry and other people's drama, and friends. You're just like, sometimes you don't have time for your spouse, sadly. And I really want to encourage you, take time to enjoy your spouse. Date your spouse. Date your spouse. Don't stop dating. Don't stop growing. Because as they evolve, you should evolve. The relationship should evolve. Things take on, new likes. You get rid of old things, and you always should be enjoying new things.
And one thing that I do love about us is that we started off as, first frenemies, friends, and then best friends. So we knew everything about each other, and we had that friendship so that when we got married and when we go through the tough times, we fall back on that friendship. We have that friendship to be able to get us.
But you say that because we got to. There's probably not some people didn't. They just jumped right in. Oh, girl, you got that hair. Hey, you got, and then they dye the hair. They have to cut the hair, the whatever. And it's like, why? That's the only reason why it's like, enjoy the reason why God gave you that person. But you
can create that friendship.
And that's the thing, is that we need to always keep the friendship created. We need to evolve it. And not be, in 1983, it's like, we can't be stuck in the past. If we're moving to the future, we're moving into tomorrow. Our relationship needs to move and progress as well.
Yes. Instead of just staying the same. Because we all change as we get older. We should. If not, then there's something wrong. But before we end, I just wanted to say, like, there was this piece of advice that I heard, and I thought that was a good idea, like, where they say, find a hobby that you guys could do together. That's different than dating. Because dating, you're getting to know each other. But when you find something that you guys could work on together, you're conversating over it. You're doing something that you guys both enjoy together, or you're learning to enjoy. So then you're learning how to work together so that when you do go into an environment where you have to work together.
The best part about us is we found our hobby in ministry.
We did.
And it's like, it's so funny because it's even complicated because you have so many emotions, but it's okay because that's what we love to do. We've decided we're all in. And we've figured a way to do it together and do whatever together. It's so much better. It's healthier for the relationship. It's healthier. There's not the temptation. There's not the irritation.
You don't leave room. That's what I love, is that we do everything together. So you never leave room for anything to happen or take place. Well, my wife never wants to come with me, so here I am. And then here goes little Jezzy. Like, ooh, I'm going to take my opportunity. Like, the enemy tries to send stuff. And so it's like, well... You should have been there with your husband.
Lord Jesus.
But anyways.
I just want to pause on that. I don't even know.
I didn't mean to make it awkward, but I get mad about it sometimes.
Oh, it's not awkward. I'm wondering the people listening. But,
I didn't mean to make it feel awkward.
There's so much in relationships. It's the one outside of ourselves. If you are married or going to get married, you will spend the most amount of time with that person. But then ironically, you end up spending the most amount of time with your coworkers, and you come home and there's these weird dynamics. And so life is changing. Life is always evolving. There's sicknesses, there's loss, there's added pressures. And so you have to be very accommodating to what's the environment, what's the scenario, what's the situation. I heard scenarios where during COVID, the one spouse was super fearful and the other wasn't, but the spouse was like, well, you can't leave.
Like controlling.
Well, no, they were fearful. It's like, you're going to bring...
You're not leaving this home.
Stop. You're going to bring it home.
Oh.
And, you know, and so it's like,
what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do in that season? And so there's a lot of factors that you can't just run to the Bible and be like, thus saith the Lord.
Right.
It's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
It's dialoguing, it's finding where there's common space and then working out of there. So
that's good. And do you remember that piece of advice that we had from the marriage counseling where the person was like, when you get married, you know, when you say in sickness and in health, for better and for worse, he's like, what if Alexis ended up getting into a bad car accident and gained 300 pounds? He's like,
I just like, you can't get the thing out. Even our producer. Well, there's no need to cut a reel because you've.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You would still love me.
I have no choice.
So, anyways, I remember that, and I'm like, and he said, vice versa. Would you still?
Vice versa. If he lost all his hair,
I said yes, I would. I mean, obviously, you don't know until it happens, but
you know the problem.
You always say if I had a nub.
The problem is we don't know, and that's the sad part. Is we use these cliche lines for sickness and for you know.
Right. And then when the time comes, you're like, nah, I didn't sign up for that.
Well, you know, God bless where we live. We're in a very, they don't know that, they don't always perceive that we're in a wholesome environment, very safe, wholesome environment to other places.
Right.
You know, we live in West Virginia, good morals, family dynamics. You go down south where there's sun, boating, money. I have seen more marriages wrecked because they get married. Very beautiful couple, both male, female.
Mm-hmm. That model couple.
10 years goes by and he's still working the same job, you know, as a technician. Mm-hmm. And then here comes some lawyer, some whatever.
Some chiseled
chiseled hunk, you know, on all type of supplements, got the boat, or doesn't even have the good looking body, but he's got money to burn. Well, I'll buy you whatever you want. I see more marriages torn apart because it's like, how come you can't give me a house? Mm-hmm. I'm tired of renting. You know, and there's so many temptations in the world, or how come this thing failed? And I'm tired of you always, you know, experimenting, trying to make a go of your hobby, whatever it is. And it's like, you won't know until you're in the midst, you know, those cliche lines are so beautiful. I love you, sweetie, for everything, no matter what happens.
That's why you got to keep God at the top.
Right. And when God's in the perspectives
and stuff, you know,
but he brings clarity to the lies of the enemy. So, hopefully you enjoyed all this the way you got to see the real Lance and Alexis.
Babe, we're not.
And all of who we are, because, you know, this is life.
Right.
Like we laugh together. You cry. I hold you. Aww. I work on my emotions.
I hold you too.
And we raise kids. We are involved in ministry and we run this. We want to see lives changed. But if you don't have the joy, and that's the thing when I say the plastic relationships, there's a lot of people, Christian or non-Christian, that live this plastic life. You know, it's interesting and it's public, so it's not a big deal. But there was a news broadcaster who got caught vaping in between commercial breaks. And
and because I tell them clouds.
No, stop. But the thing is that like, because he's a conservative, the whole internet went abuzz. Like, can you believe he vapes?
And he's worldly?
Yes.
Oh,
but that's how. But it's like,
but
because he's a conservative, there's no way he could vape. It's like they had a perception that his life was like this, and so we have these perceptions that they can be this, and then you have another version that life has to look this way so that they will like me. I can't let them know that my kid is a hellion. I can't let them know that, you know, this and that. And it's like, better to disarm the enemy and be very transparent than being plasticky. Yo!
No, most people in marriages are suffering and dying, but when you ask them, like, yeah, we're great, everything's roses, then they end up splitting, or someone ends up cheating on the spouse and then they're not together. And I'm like, what the heck? I thought you were peachy.
Right.
Like, I'm almost 30 and half of my friends are already on their second marriage. I'm like, what the heck? So it's just like, when you're fake about it, like, be real, because
but be real with
like
your spouse.
Said, right.
And that's
be
the
real
thing
with your spouse. And if you do need help, like, get help and bring God into it, because you don't want to end up being that statistic.
Right.
But anyways, I get passionate.
We know. For better or for worse, that's how we're going to end it.
Baby.
Well, that was officially a new culture show where we lost it. We've never, not a culture show, a podcast. It felt like a culture show there for a moment, but it's been fun.
Well, it's culture because
It is culture because now Alexis is on there.
Right.
Enjoy this. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to check out Alexis Speak Life. Also, our Tuesday morning encouragement. This has definitely been a different spin because it got to be a lot more free and just go off the cuff and enjoy it. And so we're going to do more. We're going to have Chad on, still going to have Vinny on, and we're going to just add some new guests in and just have real life topics.
Oh, I love you.
I love you too, Alexis.
Why'd you hesitate?
Because I'm trying to sign out and you're like, I just love you.
Us cultural people, we always...
Yep, just share your emotions.
4 goodbyes. No, 4 goodbyes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Got it. All right, 4 goodbyes. Bye.
Bye.